So firstly, Jon, thanks so much for taking some time today to talk to us about your kind of experience with Mounts Bay. Obviously, you are a sailing guru, so much experience, not only kind of with the Olympic team, but all the way back through the ROA as well. It's great to have you on. And obviously, Chris, thanks so much for CB Cover Store to get the intro for this. This is absolutely priceless, and I'm sure the solo class are going to absolutely love this. So really, Jon, this is all going to be for you. It'd be great to kind of get some insight on Mounts Bay, some stories, what are the wind conditions like, anything on gate starts, we're looking at that. Chris, feel free to jump in. We'll try and get this just a flowing conversation going. So Jon, what's your first thought when you think about Mounts Bay? Is it the Mount, or is it a pint, or what's your favourite thing?
I mean, Mounts Bay has a huge number of memories for me. First of all, if you're going to be black and white, it is a fantastic sailing venue. So it's always hard to go somewhere with preconceived conditions, because the locals usually tell you it's never normally like this. But I have a lot of memories there. I think that's where I won my first nationals. I also arguably lost a very close nationals when I managed to port tack the fleet relatively early and carried on going when actually I needed to just carry on a bit more to the left, and people who hit a corner actually came out a long way in front of me. In terms of my own sort of personal life, it was my last family holiday before my dad passed away in 2012. One of my great sadnesses, he never got to see Lily won Olympic gold medal at London. So that's where we took him for our last family holiday. And I think, in terms of venues, I've got a lot of memories of Mounts Bay. So that tells you a great deal. I think when you come down to favourite place for a pint, that's always going to be a bit of a, personal preference. But I'm a big fan of supporting the sailing clubs.
Good.
And to do the social at the sailing club, go to the sailing club bar. And I think, we've got to be honest, 2021, it's a bit of a funny year, but things are definitely heading in the right direction, and supporting clubs is it's the way to go forward. And I think one of the really nice things is just you've got that huge beach for friends and family, and whatever you call it, the hangers on.
Yeah,
it's not just about sailing.
Yeah, it's definitely good for families, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of fun going.
I think one of the things with COVID is maybe people have been forced to sail with their household, or at least sail locally at their local club when we're all trying to minimise travel. I actually see that as a really good thing, that sailing as a sport should be grassroots, built up, rather than elite sailors trickling down. And I know I'm lucky enough to work with incredibly talented sailors at the elite end, but at heart I'm a club sailor, and I'm gutted to be missing my Wednesday evening races and a pint after, and I'm lucky enough to live walking distance from Castle Cove, which is where I sail from now.
Well, it's always that thing on the Wednesday in the evening. It's always for the lightweight. So I think Chris and we might have to miss out on the lightweight sailing on a Wednesday eve.
It depends where you are. Basically, the stronger the sea breeze, the longer it lasts. So I've always campaigned to have the evening racing start as early as possible, especially being in one of the slower boats at our club, so we can finish before the breeze disappears. But apparently people can't get off work quick enough. So I wonder, with the new way of working, maybe people will be able to work from home on Wednesdays and we can all have earlier start times. But I guess we've gone off the Mounts Bay topic already.
We have. Well, let's bring it back to Mounts Bay. Obviously, you were talking about those two events, two completely different events, but also two events that really kind of stuck with you and had completely different outcomes. What were the kind of the main differences in those two competitions? Was the wind really different? Was it swinging a different way? Was it a westerly, a northerly? Do you remember? Or
well, I have to say the one which I made the mistake. It was our current Olympic representative Elliot Hansen, who beat me and quite comfortably. I remember crossing them when I was on port by 6-7 boat lengths, and I looked behind, and Lorenzo and Elle were stuck together, and I was on a really nice lifting tack, and I thought, oh, phew, thank goodness for that. But I don't think you can read too much into past situations. One thing I would always say, and I include the Olympics in this, is you can't go to a venue with too many preconceived ideas. And it would be so nice if I could, give you a quick venue guide. But then I'm going to get a host of angry emails in a few months' time when it just wasn't like that. So you have a lot of factors in sailing, and that's why I love it so much. If I just ran 100 meters, and looking at me, you can see I don't run 100 meters, but the environment would be very similar every single time. Whereas you can go to Mounts Bay and you can, in one championships, you can have 3 completely different regattas. One of the things you said to me was talking about current. Just to be clear, tide is the thing that goes up and down. So that's important with how high you pull your trailer up the beach. It's actually the current we worry about, because that's what moves your floating boat around on the race course. And that's one of my pet hates, just to try and use the right terminology, because when I first started coaching people whose first language was English, I got myself in so much trouble. So you remember how easy it is to say the wind is going right, which means it's on the left going to right. The wind is on the right, meaning there's more pressure on the right hand side, or the wind is right, meaning the next phase will be to come to the left. So I've become really careful the way I speak, and perhaps that goes back to being an engineer. But when I was coaching Lily for the 2012 Olympic Games, my final talk to her on the slipway was literally 3 words, not even whole sentences. Everyone wondered why I helped her launch the boat, but it's just to get those key ideas in your head when you tow out to the start. So that's what you need in Mounts Bay. This is a sea breeze type of day, or if the wind is really, really light and you have springs, and I haven't looked at it, maybe it could be a current type of day. Or if it's a typical offshore breeze, maybe it's a tack on the shifts type of day. But I do my best with my coaching, but it's pretty hard for me to sit here in my living room on March and tell you what it's going to be like. I mean, anything more than 3-day forecasts, I don't particularly look at, even with the really accurate information I have. And that's why for something like the America's Cup, it must be super hard for them to choose equipment ahead of time. So yeah, you want to go to the championship, as fit as you can, and you've done as much sailing as you can. But psychologically, if you're prepared for a windy week and you don't get it, or vice versa, you've made it really hard.
And also with the big slipway from the beach pulling your boat up, obviously that's going to be a workout. So you need to make sure you're either quite strong or got a good light trolley, or just being able to pull it up. Maybe
a little bit of advice is do go for a quick walk on the beach at low water and see where the rocks are, because you don't want to find them at high water. That's always a bit embarrassing. I mean, I think probably the locals will be very friendly and tell you where to go, or maybe just follow a local person out. But that's the only thing to bear in mind. I mean, the launching, generally speaking, is fantastic, because you've just got that that opportunity to have several boats go at the same time. At the same time, when you go to the beach, sailing as a sport, we need to have a really good PR. So try not to run over any small children, dogs, etc. as you're making your way to the beach. And the nice thing about the solo, I guess you can pull your sail up when you're about 1.5 meters from the water. But even so, as a sport, I think we've got such a good opportunity to come out of here looking really good, because we're, especially for single-handers like solo, we're really socially distanced. I have seen interesting social distances at Windward Marks with solos before, but I mean, generally speaking, we're self-contained, we're well ventilated, and viruses really don't like UV light and salt. So there's my sail pitch for everyone generally. But yeah, for Mounts Bay, I mean, it's good to get there a little bit early, so you're comfortable, but I wouldn't read anything into it, especially things like sea breeze. People ask me about sea breeze. I normally don't want to make any comment until about 10 a.m. because up to that point, you still don't really know. You know, you need to see what's happened or happening. Sorry.
Perfect. And there's one thing, obviously, and I've seen a lot of posts that have been going around on social with the solo class now, kind of with 100 boats entry and nearly something like, is it 40 or 30 or 40 on the waiting list, Chris? And the introduction of gate starts,
isn't it? That's amazing. I didn't know that. That's really good.
Yeah. So I think there might be a little kind of discussion around kind of gate starts and what to look for, because I know it's not kind of the most common thing to do in a solo. There's a few kind of RS videos and a good enterprise one as well, where it's unfortunately a bit of a knock. But what's your kind of experience with gate starts? Any kind of tips or any advice?
That brings me back 20 odd years when, you know, laser events were so huge you had no choice but to do a gate start. Otherwise, you know, with a line start that long, the binoculars probably weren't good enough to catch somebody in the middle of the line. I did some regattas in the States. They did a long line, and they actually had a sort of committee boat in the middle, although it wasn't necessarily exactly on the line. So gate starts are good. I think in a boat like a solo, it's a lot less scary than in boats that plane upwind. And I think it works very well at venues where it's not a one-sided racetrack. So if you are racing in the late afternoon with a sea breeze, and I guess I probably need to answer that question a little bit better, you know, it's not much fun when everybody always wants to start late or whatever and go one way. I mean, people say Lake Garda's a fantastic venue, and in a lot of ways it is, but in certain race course placements there's only one way to go, and for me that's not really great racing. I mean, the thing with Mounts Bay, the reason you get such fantastic waves is because they roll in from a very open sector. There's no land if you draw a straight line for a long time, so you can get the most amazing waves. But at the same point, there's really not much land to help generate that sea breeze. So that's why, you know, you can't look first thing in the morning and see whether there's going to be a sea breeze. Sometimes it feels like you get several false starts because there's so little land there. So the clouds start to form. As the clouds form, they block the sun. The land cools down again a bit. Then the clouds clip, and then and so on, and gradually, you know, you get a late and a weak sea breeze. And I'm not biased, just being factually accurate, but if you go a lot further east like Weymouth and you draw a line northeast, you have a lot more land along that line, so you get a better engine for your sea breeze. It also means in the winter months, when we get a northeasterly, the wind's coming over a lot of land and it can be shifty as you like. And that's, you know, typical of the winter. And when people think about land friction and things like that, that's not really applicable in the summer, where you have a big difference between sea temperature and land temperature. So the gate starts would always worry me if it's a bit of a one-way track, because it just turns into a speed competition. At the same time, having 100 boats, everyone just wants to go racing and have a pint afterwards. And if that's the way that you get the racing starting, you know, nobody enjoys 7 general recalls. In fact, I won another nationals at Mounts Bay where I think we had 2 or 3 general recalls, and they ran out of time to do a further race. So every start, I was like, "Are we going? We go?" "Oh no, we got going." And then finally, I sort of sailed in with no further race and felt a bit deflated because it was such a close competition. You know, you always want to decide by racing. So that I would say a lot of the time when you win, you're not overjoyed. You end up just feeling a bit relieved, or I did in that case. But yeah, the sea breeze, you know, it's a pretty hard one to call. So gate starts, I said, I think work very well and the wind's quite constant. And normally you tend to benchmark yourself against the person who's the rabbit. So yeah, if you think they're sailing super quick, which I guess they will be amongst the quickest on the conditions of the previous day, just based on the results, then, you know, you're looking at starting late and let them do the hard work. You could probably argue that if it's 25 knots, you just want to have a bit of a rest and stuff like. I am joking now, Chris, before you. Or if the conditions are very different and you feel that maybe you're quicker and you want to get out the gate early, but you need to be really aware that strategy, that's what you do, like a time trial in the absence of other boats, can often be overruled by tactics. So on a normal start line, if the pin end is really favoured, you might actually not want to start there from the boat-to-boat tactics point of view if it just looks a mess. Hopefully we'll all be super good people when we go back to racing in terms of the racing rules, but I would say the point is it doesn't matter whether you're in the right or wrong if you end up in a great big tackle or you hit the rabbit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Do you do before it starts? Do you do like two boats setting off on the same course?
I'm a simple person to do that. I've got to be honest. How I coach and what I do myself are probably two separate things. So do what I say, not what I do. Because as I've got older, one of the big things for me, I don't get many hours in the boat. I get hundreds of hours on the water, but not many hours in the boat. So at the moment, it's only people who have elite status who can sail at the academy. And I'm not elite status. I can work because I work with elite status from another country, so I can go to Lanzarote and coach. I can't sail. So depending on the conditions, actually just trying to do a very quick warm-up. Right. A lot of the research shows, injury is not caused by lack of stretching, it's caused by lack of warming up. Stretching is something you do at the end of the day. But yeah, I'm certainly not got the energy these days to do a full beat. If you are going to do that testing, it's really important to try and equalise it. So, for example, I don't know how well this is going to show up on your video, but you do 2 sets of 4 minutes. You do 2 minutes tag, 2 minutes cross, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. You get that sort of figure of 8 or 2 diamonds. Because the thing is, if the wind is unstable, and I guess I need to define this very clearly, if the wind is unstable, it doesn't help you very much. So unstable is wind movement up, down. So you can have really unstable wind that never shifts all day. It comes from 240. And you can have really stable wind that's shifty as you like. So a good example, hopefully you won't have this, but a really good example of stable wind is when you rock up to sail in January and it's like 5 degrees and you have this really, really low level cloud, and you don't see the sun all day, so the wind can't go up and down because it's got a hat on it, and then that's really stable wind. The unstable wind is when you have the massive big cloud, really big difference from top to bottom, and there that there's a lot of mixing. And one of the things we look at for really important venues, we look at the inversion layer. So we see, where the mixing is taking place and where you've got that hat on, because that makes far more difference as well for the sea breeze. If you're looking at weather systems, whether it's going to rain or not, because typically, even in sunny venues like Mounts Bay, we do sometimes have big black clouds come across the course. And the bad news is they drop rain, but the good news is at the same time they normally drop the wind, and that can just completely make the difference for the whole race. And you asked me about the sea breeze, but it's not rocket science. If you have any rain and that cools the land down, that's probably the end of that. But yeah, Mounts Bay, I think it's good. It could be a bit of everything.
Good. Good, Chris. Have you got any other questions on gate starts or breeze or? Yeah,
we could spend 2 hours just talking about the wind here. What we just talked about.
But the things that with the current, for example, is you need to go and measure it on the day, because where the race course is set can make a really massive difference. But most prudent race officers will, try and put it in an area of little current because it makes it easier to get starts off. And one of the things I find frustrating is, people say, there's no current in Portland Harbour. There definitely is, because the water goes up and down. It's just the race officers are very good normally at putting start lines fairly central to the wall, so there's not that much current in the middle. But then, when there's a slight change in wind direction from the normal summer southwesterly, or they have to put 2 race courses because the harbour's full, people are amazed that everybody's over when the current happens to be underneath them. And they come out with all sorts of reasons might be happen, but actually they just needed to throw a 2/3 full bottle of water next to a mark that's definitely anchored.
Yeah.
That's one of the problems we have in Lanzarote, by the way. Fantastic waves, very similar to Enoshima when you go to the west, to the ocean side of the island. You also don't have to go that far before it's like 1,000 meters deep and you can't actually anchor in it.
God, that would definitely be a bit of a challenge. So I reckon, if there's going to be any capsizes in Mounts Bay, that's another comment. Make sure you don't turtle and completely hit the mast if you're too shallow, or
I think
might face that.
Anyway, isn't it? It doesn't matter what class you sail, but the mast is meant to be in the air and the foils are meant to be in the water. And I remember at the Olympic trials for 96 games when we had it must have been over 40 knots coming through. I know your memory always tends to exaggerate things. We did all turn turtle just to try and save our sails, but generally speaking, yeah, you want the foils in the water at all times. You saw what happens to the AC boats when they come out.
Oh wow, yeah.
It's not quite that scary in a solo, but it's still not a good thing.
Well, it depends if you can get under the boom. Sometimes it can be quite scary if you can't fit under the boom.
You probably read my blog, but the first time I honestly thought the boat was trying to kill me, because I'm used to classes, especially if you're a bit light, where you just put the kicker on as hard as you can. And I did that, and it ran me by the buoyant side and squished me against the centre. I thought, this is it. This is it. So, yeah, it's funny because I did work for Shirley Robertson in Europe, which has a very low boom, but you can sort of escape from it. Whereas I think the Solo made an attempt to me to the fleet. But, I guess we learn a lot of things the hard way.
Yeah, let the kicker off.
I think that the main thing I'm just getting from this insight is everything just boils down to getting on the water, getting practice in the boat, getting to the venue, being fit, healthy, ready to kind of go. And I think with COVID hopefully coming to, well, it probably won't come to an end just yet, but with COVID, with a roadmap out, I think the main thing here is to try and get everyone back in their boat so they're able to
just enjoy it. I mean, to put it into perspective, to learn a venue, maybe I'm a bit slow, but to learn a venue, like it takes 7 or 8 weeks in the same conditions. That's why everybody's desperate to be getting out a plane on the 17th of May in Japan, because to learn the conditions, because it often seems to go in cycle, and then you sort of have 1 week of sea breeze, and then 1 week of no sea breeze, and 1 week of sea breeze. And that's why if you turn up to a venue just a few days before, it often feels like you're racing in completely different conditions to your train. I mean, it happened with the laser wells several times, where the men and the radio had completely different conditions, with the regattas just 1 day apart. So we in Japan, we trained in an offshore wind and then raced in an onshore wind, and they had the opposite, and you couldn't make it up. So I think probably one of the big things is just to rock up at the venue, well rested and itching to take that cover off. And I'm sure they will do a very good job on the social, because they always have.
Good.
Very true.
Good. So I think really to kind of wrap this up, because I definitely think this is will give the class loads of good insight. Obviously, we know where to get the best pint. Go and support the local sailing club. We'll definitely do that, John.
There's no one who will employ me for my venue guides, will they?
And so finally, obviously, in a couple of sentences, what's your top tip for gate starts and your top tip for Mounts Bay, just to wrap up?
Well, without being too clear, don't ram the rabbit. I have distinct memories in Hailing Island. This was just training, but I sailed out against the current for, I don't know, it felt like an hour and a half. And when I got out there, the very first rabbit, the starboard boat failed to bear away, mounting my cockpit, broke the tip suspension in half, and I had to sail all the way back in again. but yeah, it's just like any time on distance. Your aim is to be as close as you can to the rabbit, just as close as you would be to line, and at full speed. And it's important to notice full speed, because for a sailor, 90% speed feels really similar to 95%. Really similar. And that's why you often don't know who had a good start until 15, 20, 25 seconds after the start, when everyone's finally reached full speed. And you see it a lot with line starts, that it's not the people who are most on the line who tend to pop out. It's about that time and distance and who had the most speed. In fact, in terms of line starts and not being OCS, actually it's much safer to be on the side of a little bit back, but a little bit faster. And that's why you always want to create that gap to leeward, because it's much easier to accelerate the boat on a fine reach than it is on a close haul course. And it's the same with the gate starts. So I just hope they leave the gate open long enough for you.
Good. Chris, have you got any final questions for Jon before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think we should have a private Zoom just 5 minutes before the start. Is that okay, Jon?
This is how it always goes.
Yeah, that's great. That's interesting. So yeah, thanks for that, Jon.
Yeah, no, Jon, really appreciate it. And Chris, thanks so much for getting the introduction with Jon. I know the solo class we're gonna absolutely love it. So hopefully this will come up soon, and we'll put it on social channels and newsletters and stuff. But really appreciate your help, Jon. And if you're down in Mounts Bay, I'm sure everyone will be happy to see you. So
get a few points bought, won't I?
A few points definitely bought. But I'll stop.
But since the lockdown, I think my drinking capacity definitely increased a bit. I don't know if I should admit to that on a recorded interview.
Well, don't worry. I'll stop the recording now. Thanks, Jon.
Right, thanks a lot.